Hello everybody, welcome to the show. Please hit the subscribe button and give this episode a thumbs hell. Watch the. From the very first moment this story broke, the internet exploded with rumors, accusations and emotional reactions from fans who believed they already knew the truth, but what nobody expected was how deeply twisted the reality actually was, because for weeks Justin was painted as the villain, his name dragged through headlines, social media comments and reaction videos, while Mama June stood quietly in the background, letting the narrative grow stronger and darker every single day. Justin was accused without proof, judged without evidence and sentenced by public opinion before law enforcement even stepped in, and that is where this story truly begins, because once the police entered the scene everything changed, and what they uncovered shocked not only fans but insiders, producers and even members of the family themselves. Sources close to the investigation revealed that the police were contacted after inconsistencies began appearing in financial records, private messages, and off-camera conversations that did not match Mama June's public statements at all, and when officers started connecting the dots, a very different picture emerged, one that completely flipped the story upside down. Justin had been accused of taking money, manipulating situations and controlling decisions behind the scenes. But when detectives reviewed bank transfers, timestamps and witness accounts, none of it aligned with the accusations. Instead, every trail pointed in one direction, and that direction led straight back to Mama June. The police investigation reportedly began quietly, with no press, no leaks and no warning, and that silence allowed officers to collect evidence without interference, and what they found was explosive text messages revealing financial instructions, recorded calls that contradicted televised claims, and a timeline that proved Justin physically could not have done what he was accused of doing. As the truth started to surface, insiders say Justin was called in for questioning not as a suspect but as a key witness, and that alone tells you everything, because when the police sat him down they already knew he was not the villain. They already had evidence that cleared his name, and they needed his cooperation to confirm what they already suspected. Justin reportedly cooperated, fully answering every question, providing access to records and explaining events in calm detail, and according to sources his story never changed, not once, which only strengthened the case against Mama June. Meanwhile, Mama June continued making public appearances, posting on social media, and allowing fans to believe Justin was responsible for everything, but behind closed doors pressure was building, because the police were now reviewing her statements line by line, comparing them to hard evidence, and the cracks were impossible to ignore. One insider described the moment police confronted Mama June with contradictions as tense, emotional and revealing, because when presented with proof her story reportedly shifted multiple times, which only raised more red flags, and this was the exact moment investigators realized the truth had been deliberately hidden. As the case progressed, officers uncovered a pattern where Mama June allegedly controlled finances, directed decisions and later distanced herself from the consequences while allowing blame to fall on Justin, and this pattern repeated itself again and again across different incidents, timelines and witnesses. What shocked fans the most was learning that several people close to the situation had tried to speak up earlier but were dismissed, ignored or silenced, and it was only when law enforcement got involved that their voices were finally heard. The turning point came when police verified a key transaction that had been publicly blamed on Justin, but records proved he never authorized it, never benefited from it, and never even had access to the account at the time, and that single discovery shattered the entire narrative. From that moment on, the investigation moved fast, because once one lie was exposed everything else unraveled, and police began documenting each inconsistency, building a clear picture that Justin had been used as a shield while the real actions happened elsewhere. Sources say when the findings were finalized, officers officially cleared Justin of all wrongdoing, and labeled him innocent in their internal report, which is why this moment is being described as a full vindication, not just a misunderstanding but a complete reversal of blame. When news of Justin being cleared reached those close to him, emotions ran high, because for weeks he had stayed silent, respecting the process, trusting that truth would eventually win, and that patience paid off in the biggest way possible. Now attention has shifted entirely toward Mama June, because once Justin was cleared the question became unavoidable: if he did not do it, then who did? And the evidence already had that answer. Fans began re-watching old clips, interviews and scenes with fresh eyes, noticing moments that suddenly made sense, noticing how certain statements felt rehearsed, how blame was subtly redirected and how responsibility was avoided. Industry insiders say this revelation could have long-term consequences, because credibility once lost is hard to regain, especially when police involvement confirms deception and manipulation. What makes this story even more powerful is the lesson behind it, because it shows how quickly public opinion can turn, how easily someone can be judged without facts, and how important it is to wait for the truth before choosing sides. Justin's innocence is not just a legal outcome, it is a reminder that silence does not always mean guilt, and that sometimes the loudest voices are hiding the most. As the dust settles, one thing is clear: this story is far from over, because questions remain about accountability, consequences, and how much damage has already been done. Fans are now demanding transparency, explanations and honesty, and they are watching every move closely, because once trust is broken, rebuilding it requires more than words. Police stepping in changed everything, and truth coming out rewrote the entire narrative, and in the end Justin walked away cleared, while Mama June was left facing the spotlight she once controlled. After Justin was officially cleared, everything around the story shifted almost instantly because the silence that once protected certain narratives suddenly became dangerous and every unanswered question started growing louder across social media fan pages and industry circles. People who had stayed neutral for weeks finally chose sides. Former supporters began speaking openly, and many who once defended Mama June now demanded explanations because police confirmation was not rumor, it was verified fact. Justin's name trended again, but this time with a completely different tone. Apology posts flooded comment sections, reaction channels admitted mistakes, and old clips were quietly removed once they no longer matched reality. Behind the scenes, producers, executives, and legal teams moved fast because when law enforcement clears someone publicly, everyone else is forced to reassess their stance. Emergency meetings were reportedly held to discuss fallout, credibility, and damage control. At the center of the pressure, Mama June faced scrutiny unlike anything before because for the first time her public words were being compared directly to official findings, not emotions, not loyalty, but documented evidence. Police did not stop after clearing Justin. They continued reviewing materials because once inconsistencies are proven, investigations often expand, and that expansion changed everything. More financial records were examined, more timelines reconstructed, and more witness accounts collected, and with every layer the gap between public statements and private facts became harder to ignore. Investigators questioned why certain decisions were made off camera, why specific accounts remained under singular control, and why blame repeatedly shifted away from the same direction. As these questions surfaced, tension grew among those closest to Mama June, because once a pattern forms, denials lose power. Justin remained mostly silent, allowing facts to speak, and that contrast stood out sharply against vague posts and indirect messaging that many interpreted as defensive. Another key revelation emerged when insiders confirmed that some accusations against Justin began as private conversations that were later exaggerated before going public, and when police compared originals to public claims, the differences were undeniable. This discovery suggested narrative shaping rather than misunderstanding, and once that idea entered the discussion, trust collapsed rapidly. Several individuals who had stayed quiet out of fear or loyalty reportedly came forward after Justin was cleared, feeling safe enough to speak, and their testimonies added weight to the investigation. These accounts described situations where responsibility was quietly redirected, decisions were later denied, and Justin became the convenient explanation when questions arose. Independent stories aligned consistently, and that alignment strengthened conclusions because consistency across sources is one of the strongest indicators of truth. Public appearances from Mama June became limited, interviews were postponed, statements delayed, and fans interpreted the silence as avoidance rather than reflection. Online reactions intensified, clips resurfaced, side-by-side comparisons spread, and moments once seen as harmless now appeared calculated, changing perception permanently. Police involvement did more than clear Justin, it exposed how narratives can be controlled when facts are withheld and how damaging that control can be. Investigators focused on motive, examining financial benefit, reputation protection, and control because understanding why blame shifted matters as much as who shifted it. The story evolved from a simple dispute into a deeper examination of power, manipulation, and accountability. Justin's supporters grew louder, demanding transparency not for drama but because trust requires honesty. Industry insiders warned that ignoring these demands could cause long-term damage because once audiences feel misled, disengagement follows. No official charges were announced at this stage, but the phrase "under investigation" carried weight, signaling that the story was still unfolding. Advisors stepped in, messaging tightened, and the situation became clearly serious. Justin was described as relieved but cautious, focused on restoring truth rather than seeking attention. Police stepping in moved the narrative away from speculation and placed it firmly in the hands of facts. And when facts lead, there is nowhere left to hide. The question was no longer whether Justin was innocent, that was already proven. The real question was how far this investigation would go and what consequences would follow. Because truth once exposed rarely stops at the first reveal. After the pressure continued to build, the focus of attention shifted even more intensely toward Mama June, because once Justin was cleared, every unanswered detail started pointing in a new direction, and fans wanted clarity, not drama, not rumors, just truth. Sources say internal conversations became tense as advisors urged caution because every statement now carried weight, and every move was being watched closely by audiences who felt misled. Behind closed doors, discussions reportedly centered on damage control, reputation repair, and how to respond without creating further contradictions because investigators were already familiar with the timeline. As scrutiny increased, old interviews resurfaced again, and fans noticed how certain explanations no longer aligned with what police findings suggested, allegedly creating a growing credibility gap. This gap mattered because once trust erodes, audiences stop believing even truthful statements, and insiders warned that silence could be interpreted as avoidance rather than strategy. Meanwhile, Justin continued to avoid public attacks, choosing instead to let verified information speak, and that restraint reportedly strengthened his position further. Supporters described his response as calm, consistent, and focused on closure rather than confrontation, which contrasted sharply with the emotional intensity surrounding the story. More reactions poured in from fans who admitted they had judged too quickly, acknowledging how easily